Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the Cowboys Beat podcast for January 22nd, 2024. On today's episode, we're going to be going over Mike McCarthy keeping his job as the Dallas Cowboys head coach, Dan Quinn returning if he doesn't get a head coaching job, Dak Prescott's potential extension, what the Cowboys are going to do over the offseason after this first-round exit, and we're going to be having our first three-round mock draft, the three-round mock draft 1.0. So, without further ado, let's get into the episode. So the Dallas Cowboys are going to keep Mike McCarthy as their head football coach. I don't agree with this move at all. I really don't. I think that this is the wrong move for this organization. This team wasn't ready. Okay, they weren't. They were a better football team than the Green Bay Packers. They were a more talented football team than the Green Bay Packers. There's a reason why they had 9 All-Pros on their team. There's a reason why the Green Bay Packers had 0 All-Pros on their team. There's a reason why the Cowboys won 12 games this past season. There's a reason why the Green Bay Packers won 9. There's a reason why the Cowboys were 8-0 at home. There's a reason why the Green Bay Packers were 4-5 on the road. And I understand, overall record for the season doesn't dictate what a team actually is, right? Because a team can catch fire late, like we saw with the San Francisco 49ers a few years ago, who knocked us off in the first round, ended up going to the NFC Championship game. A team can catch fire late, but at the end of the day, this is a team that a few weeks prior to playing the Cowboys, they got lit up by Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers. They lost to Tommy DeVito and the New York Giants. They got killed by Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who, by the way, Baker Mayfield played a really good game today versus the Detroit Lions. There's a reason why these things happened, okay? The Cowboys were the better football team, but they didn't play like it. You want to know why? Because 50 players on that team decided not to play that day. Because there were players, don't get it twisted, there were players that showed up to play that day. In particular, the 3 that I'm looking at, Jake Ferguson, tremendous effort from him. Michael Gallup, tremendous effort from him. And Tony Pollard played his ass off. There were a few guys that showed up to play. But overall, this team looked shook. They looked like a team that felt the pressure. They looked scared in this game. And they're playing a team that was the youngest team in NFL history to ever make the playoffs. Okay? They lost in the first round, and they didn't look competitive. They didn't look competitive at all. That game wasn't close, guys. They lost 48-32, and the score of the game does not dictate how poorly the Cowboys played and just how outclassed they got in that game. The score is not indicative of how the game actually was. They got killed. And even though the score dictates that they got killed that game, it was worse than what it actually was. This is a team that's consistently at the top of the league in penalties under Mike McCarthy. Okay? 2023, they were 3rd in the league in penalties with 115. 2022, they were 9th in the league in penalties with 104. 2021, they were 1st in the league with 127 penalties. 2020, they were 11th in the league with 96. So 2020, not that bad when you compare it to the other years. It's just unacceptable, though. He has a 1-3 playoff record with the Dallas Cowboys. And I understand he wasn't the play caller for 3 of those losses, but the one game that he was the play caller was the ugliest of the losses. This team did not show up prepared in big games. They just didn't. When you look at the 3 biggest games of the season for them outside of those Philly games, because those Philly games were big and they showed up prepared, and I will give them credit for that. Even when they went on the road and put up a really good fight against Philly when they were playing good football, I gave them a lot of credit for that. I said, look, you're not going to win them all. It's a tough spot. You played your heart out and you just weren't the better team that day. Get them next time. And then when they played in Dallas, they got them that time. They played really good football that day, but I think I might put that more on the Eagles completely folding than I do the Cowboys playing really good. But you know what? You want to know what? They deserved credit for that win. No doubt about it. San Fran showed up flat. Arizona, by the way, 2 weeks prior to the San Fran game, showed up flat. Bills showed up flat. And then the worst of them all was the Packers. That was the worst loss of them all. And I understand the offense put up 32 points, but you were down 27-7 at halftime, guys. I mean, that's ridiculous. This is a front-running football team. Aaron Jones told you that too. He said that before the game. He said, we're going to punch those front runners in the face. And that they did. They absolutely did. And it was embarrassing to see. They don't respect this team. They don't. A 9-8 football team, youngest team in NFL history, came into your building, said, we're going to take the ball first, called you front runners, put on sunglasses after they scored. They weren't scared of you. They weren't scared one bit of you. And it's because of the culture that this organization has. It starts at the top with Jerry Jones, and it trickles down to Mike McCarthy. People aren't afraid of losing their jobs. There's going to be no accountability coming out of this game. Mike McCarthy keeps his job as the head coach. If Dan Quinn doesn't want to take a head coaching job, or if he doesn't get a head coaching job, he'll be the defensive coordinator. Dak will get the biggest contract in NFL history. CeeDee Lamb's going to get the highest NFL or the highest wide receiver contract in the NFL. Mike is going to get the highest defensive player contract in the NFL. Players are going to get paid. Coaches are going to keep their job. And by the way, if Dan Quinn gets a head coaching job, you want to know what that's called? A promotion. When you're a defensive coordinator and you get and you become a head coach, that's a promotion. So your defensive coordinator gets promoted. Your head coach keeps his job. Players get paid. Where's the accountability? That's not acceptable. This loss is not acceptable, guys. They're nowhere near a Super Bowl. Talent-wise, yes, they have plenty of talent on this team. Oh, man, they have talent for days on this team. This is an A roster that they have, guys. And especially when you have a guy like Bill Belichick out there. You know, people want to call him a fossil, that the game has passed him by. I saw this guy hold Josh Allen in a must-win game for Josh Allen to like 145 yards. Had more interceptions than touchdowns. Played good football against the Miami Dolphins, one of the most innovative offenses in football. You know, I think it was a week 3 game. They played the Miami Dolphins. There wasn't any tape of, you know, defenses playing good football against the Dolphins. New England went out there, did a really good job against that offense. Bill Belichick understands the modern NFL game, or at least how to defend modern NFL offenses, something that Dan Quinn doesn't know how to do. And yeah, he probably would have brought in Josh McDaniels. I get it. But at the end of the day, that defense would have been playing at such a high level that as long as the offense puts up 24 points a game, they'd be straight. They'd be straight. There's so much talent on this defense. And I would have loved to have seen what Bill Belichick would have done with this defense. And just overall, man, like, I get it. Mike McCarthy's not going to get he's not getting an extension this offseason. Doesn't mean that he can't get an extension next offseason. This team's got to make the NFC Championship game, or bye-bye Mike McCarthy. I don't want to hear about this divisional round and, oh, we're heading in the right direction. No, you're not. You're not. You lose in the divisional round, you're not heading in the right direction. Make the NFC Championship game. You know, yeah. Well, Mike McCarthy deserves an extension if they make the NFC Championship game. But is that what this is about? Is this about making the NFC Championship game, or is this about winning Super Bowls? And how'd you come to the conclusion that a guy who coached a team who got smoked in the first round when they were a much better football team, how can you convince me, how can you convince the fan base that this guy is the right guy for the job? They're nowhere near a Super Bowl with this coach. Personnel is not the problem with this football team. It's not. You see coaches out here, Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur got the absolute most out of his football team. Pete Carroll last season got the absolute most out of the Seattle Seahawks. You know, there are coaches that get the most out of their personnel. And if Mike McCarthy could get the most out of his personnel with the Cowboys, they'd win a ton of football games, which they do, but they'd actually have postseason success. You know, the games that actually matter the most. So the Cowboys keep Mike McCarthy. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it whatsoever. In other news, Dan Quinn is expected to be back as the defensive coordinator if he doesn't get a head coaching job. Which, by the way, if you're an owner, ask yourself this question. Are you hiring Dan Quinn over some of the candidates that are out there? Are you hiring Dan Quinn over a Vrabel, over a Belichick, over a Harbaugh, over a Ben Johnson, over Bobby Slowick, over McDonald from Baltimore? Are you going to hire Dan Quinn over any of these guys? Because I wouldn't. And I think you'd be crazy to do that. And honestly, if he doesn't get this Seattle job, I don't think he's going to get a head coaching job. I think that's his best shot. I don't think he's getting the job in Washington. I think that's going to Ben Johnson in Detroit. And what other jobs are there left for him to potentially get? He's going to be back with the Dallas Cowboys, guys. That is my prediction for this season. He will be the defensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys this year. And expect to see the same that you saw from this defense this year. You know, it's so funny. I hear so many excuses about Dan Quinn. You know, I love, well, what do you expect him to do about the lack of linebackers? I don't know. Play the linebackers that you have. Maybe not roll into the season with 3 linebackers on your roster. If you're a defensive coordinator and you see that many linebackers on your roster, you got to put your hands up and say, whoa, 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 whoa. We can't do this, guys. Okay? We got to make sure that we're stocked at linebacker so that if, God forbid, Leighton Vander Esch, who was an injury-prone player over the course of his career, if something happens to him, we got to make sure that we have an adequate replacement for him. But they didn't have that. They rolled with 3 linebackers, and I was under the assumption, okay, they're going to play Micah more at linebacker. Nope. Didn't happen. Played a majority of his snaps at defensive end. And look, you know, there were some perks to keeping that many safeties. Right? Like they kept Wanye Thomas, who we all see. I mean, this guy is he's a top 3 safety on that football team. You know, I look Malik Hooker, Donovan Wilson, and then Wanye Thomas. He's the 3rd best safety on that team. Jaron Kearse. No, I'm done with Jaron Kearse. He probably won't be back with the team next year either if we're keeping it 100 here. You know, so that was the lone positive that came out of that. But you kept Israel McCwamu on your team. Why'd you do that? If you weren't going to use him, which, by the way, I like Israel McCwamu a lot. I think the guy can flat out play. And I saw him do it in the biggest moments for the Cowboys in the 2022 season. I saw him come out and play really good football against Chris Godwin. I saw him play good football against the San Francisco 49ers. Okay, so I need to know what happened for Dan Quinn to sour on Izzy like that to the point where, like, he barely got any time this year. It's incredible to me. Israel McCwamu is a guy that's like a Swiss Army knife, right? Like a guy like Dallas Goedert for the Eagles, I look at Israel McCwamu and I say, yo, go handle that. Good length, physical, sticky in coverage against bigger receivers, whether that be big slot receivers or big tight ends. This guy can flat out play, and he didn't play it all this year. But if you were going to keep him on your roster, like, why not play him? And if you weren't going to keep him on your roster, and if, like, you risk linebackers at that point. 3 linebackers going into the season is unacceptable, flat out unacceptable. And, you know, that's a call that Dan Quinn made. You know, he had a horrendous game plan versus the Green Bay Packers. Just flat out horrendous. And at every turn, Matt LaFleur ran circles around him. He has a lot of problems with that coaching tree. He really does. And you want to know what the problem is? That coaching tree is taking over the NFL, guys. You're going to start seeing that within this division this year with Ben Johnson. I don't know if he comes from that coaching tree. I didn't look that up. But he does a lot of that Shanahan, McVay stuff. You know, you're going to see these guys for a long time here. We'll see what happens with Bobby Slowick and where he goes. Maybe he goes to an NFC team. And maybe you have to deal with that guy. But these guys aren't going anywhere, and it's very clear that Dan Quinn has a lot of trouble going up against that style of coordinator. You know, he did good against Sean McVay, no doubt about it, these past 2 seasons. He did. Shanahan, LaFleur took him to the cleaners. Mike McDaniel, even though the score didn't dictate it, took him to the cleaners. They did not play the level of defense that people thought that they did against the Miami Dolphins. They didn't. Tua didn't show up. I mean, Tua was not good that game. He showed up when it mattered the most. Tua was missing throws all over the field. Miami Dolphin receivers were dropping footballs all over the field. It was ridiculous that they were even that close in that game. You know, consistently struggling against good offenses. Like I said, that's something that I got jotted down in my notes here. Playing guys out of position. Marquise Bell is not a linebacker. He's not. he is a J-Ron Curse type of safety. That's the role that Marquise Bell can play. And I think he's a really good football player. I do. But the thing is, they didn't put him in the best position to succeed. And to his credit, he tried. It's not like this guy went out there and lacked effort. Marquise Bell gave a ton of effort for the Cowboys this year. He was a good asset for them. But when teams realized, hey, we have a 205-pound linebacker, let's run the football at him. And guys, here's the thing. Was he actually 205 pounds? Did he lose weight during the season? I mean, there's a very real possibility that this guy was under 200 pounds playing linebacker for the Cowboys. Just not big enough. And maybe that could work if you had a Mike linebacker that could deal with double team blocks so that you can keep a guy like that clean. But they didn't have that. Leighton Vander Esch, not a Mike linebacker. Neither is Damone Clark. And they play the same way, too. And it's very discouraging to say. Damone Clark, when he was at LSU, was downhill all game. Now he gets to the NFL and he starts catching people. It's a mess, man. Didn't adjust in big games. It didn't adjust at all. Like when offenses were giving them work, he made slight adjustments. Gilmore, go deal with DK Metcalf. Okay, like he made slight adjustments like that. But wholesale adjustments to where, oh, hey, Mikey, you're playing really good at my off-ball linebacker. Hey, go play off-ball linebacker. Things like that. Adjusting for having a lack of linebackers. Hey, Will, go get me some linebackers. I mean, are you trying to tell me that if Dan Quinn went up to Will McClay before the trade deadline, which, by the way, guys, Leighton Vander Esch got hurt before the trade deadline. They said that they were good with their team. They didn't make any moves because they were good with their team. Okay, so Dan Quinn okayed the fact that they had a lack of linebackers on this team. If he didn't feel like he had adequate linebackers on his team and enough depth at that position, then he should have went out of the way and said, hey, Will, we're light at linebacker. I need you to go get me somebody. And Will McClay would have went and got him somebody. There were linebackers on the market that you could have picked up. But they had Rashaan Evans. Okay, and they didn't play him. And when they did play him, he showed some good things on tape, guys. So I'm really done with Dan Quinn. And this defense fell apart after week 13. You want me to go over some numbers for you guys? Shout out to Tom Downey at Chat Sports for bringing this up. Okay, since week 13, overall EPA on defense, 27th in the league, 0.078. Pass defense EPA, 28th in the league, 0.230. Run defense EPA, 16th, negative 0.102. Success rate, 27th in the league, 48%. Pass defense success rate, 31st in the league, 52.7%. Run defense success rate, 24th in the league, 42.4%. And this guy is going to come back and be the defensive coordinator. It's happening, guys. Sooner you prepare yourself for this disappointing news, the worse it's going to feel. Dan Quinn's going to be back, and there's going to be no accountability with the coaches. That defense was terrible versus the Packers. We could put as much blame on Dak as we want, but overall, the defense was the reason why the Cowboys lost this game. Did you guys see the defenses this weekend? Lions defense being able to make stops. Ravens, Chiefs, they were able to make some stops. San Francisco 49ers, all these defenses were able to make stops for their quarterbacks and their offense, right? You put any of these quarterbacks in the situation that Dak was in, they're not winning that game. And Dak didn't play good against the Green Bay Packers, and we're going to get to him here quickly because I want to make sure that everybody gets their accountability. The biggest figureheads. Jerry Jones, look, he put together a good roster. This is a good football team. My problem with Jerry Jones is the fact that this isn't a winning culture that he has here, and he's hiring bad coaches. Those are my two biggest gripes with Jerry. Outside of that, he has a great personnel department. They put a lot of talent on the field, but the coaches don't get enough out of that talent. So if I'm going to get on Jerry, I'm going to get on that. But I'm holding the three biggest guys that we see on the field every single week accountable. Mike, Dan, Dak. Those are the three biggest guys. And we're going to get to Dak here real quick. We're going to talk about his extension, but we're going to take a quick break here. So it's expected that Dak Prescott is going to get a contract extension. It is going to be very big, guys. It's probably going to be the biggest contract that a quarterback has ever gotten in NFL history. It's just how it is. The market keeps going up year after year. We thought that Dak Prescott getting $40 million a year, what's that, 3 years ago now, was a lot of money. The market is now up to damn near $60 million. These things are going to continue to go up. These numbers are going to continue to go up. And that's just the way the league is. But, the main question that I have is it fair to criticize Dak Prescott for his 2023 season? I mean, he was flat out incredible this year with a play caller that I don't necessarily think is up to date with the modern NFL. He did a lot of really good work. I mean, cut down on his interceptions, had a second team all-pro season. I thought that he improved on some of the things that he needed to improve on this year. One problem that he had was not seeing certain defenders over the middle of the field, and it did bite him in the back in that Green Bay game. And, when he did turn the ball over a few times, that was some of the mistakes that he made. But I saw less of that this year. Hopefully he can continue to cut that down. I think it's fair to say this. Dak had a great regular season, excellent regular season. He deserved that second team All-Pro. But I mean, he wasn't good in that postseason game. But here's the thing, guys. I do want to bring this up. The defense was terrible that game. It was really bad. And I'm not trying to, push blame away from Dak Prescott because he deserves a good amount of blame. But I want to let you guys in on something. Last year versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Dak Prescott got off to a slow start. And those first two drives got off to a slow start. You want to know what the difference is? The defense got stops. Okay, Dak got off to a slow start versus the Green Bay Packers. You want to know what the difference was? The defense wasn't getting stops. Okay, that was the difference between those two playoff games. Dak was able to settle in. He had confidence in his defense. And when he saw that his defense was having trouble against the Green Bay Packers, he started pressing. That first interception with Jair Alexander, I don't think it was a bad play by Dak. Okay, I didn't love the play design. I didn't, but Jair Alexander made a really good play. Probably got away with pass interference, holding, whatever it may be. One of those two calls, whether the ball was in the air or not, depending. I'd have to go back and look. But he got away with something. But it was a great play by Jair Alexander. Tip your cap to the guy. He did a really good job on that play. But here's the thing. Dak is 1-3 in the playoffs in these past 3 seasons. I mean, look, I'm not paying attention to the Dak from 2019 and before that because he wasn't a developed, refined quarterback at that point, right? He was still a developing young quarterback. So, hiccups in the playoffs are to be expected. He's going into year 9 now, guys. And I know this is a tough conversation to have because I really like Dak Prescott. I do. And I'm not saying that the Cowboys should get rid of him. I'm not saying that at all. Because there's a very real possibility that if you get rid of Dak Prescott, that you're going to replace him with somebody that's not even close to Dak Prescott. He is a top 8 quarterback in the league. There's no doubt about it. And it's very hard to find quarterbacks that play at that high of a level. And do you guys actually believe in this organization's ability to scout quarterbacks? They wanted to trade up for Paxton Lynch. They wanted to trade up for Connor Cook in the 2016 draft. They thought that Jameel Showers was going to be a guy. They lucked into Tony Romo. They lucked into Dak Prescott. This isn't a Green Bay thing to where, they were able to evaluate a quarterback and make a decision to go pick somebody up, and they had success finding quarterbacks like that. It's not one of those things. Tony Romo was an undrafted free agent. He exceeded every expectation put on him. He did. He exceeded expectations. You might say, oh, well, he fell in the playoffs. Guys, the fact that he was an undrafted free agent and he got as far as he did means that he exceeded the expectations that were put on him at the beginning of his career. He exceeded expectations. But once he got onto that stage, once he started being looked at as a premier quarterback, yes, he fell short of the expectations from that standpoint. But if you're an undrafted free agent the likelihood of you becoming a franchise quarterback to the extent of Tony Romo is not very high. And when you're a 4th-round pick that the Cowboys got from a compensatory pick, and you become a quarterback to the level of a Dak Prescott, you have exceeded every expectation. But I say all this to say, because I went on a little bit of a tangent there, 1-3 in the playoffs, it's something we got to look at, guys. And in those 3 playoff games that they lost, he played bad football. He just did. Look lost, look confused, look like the pressure got to him. And you got to ask yourself this question if you're the front office. All right, does he get nervous in these spots? And if he gets nervous, how do we work around that? You know, because I do believe that Dak at the beginning of these playoff games feels a little bit of nerves. But once he starts to see something's clicking, then he lets loose a little bit. How do we counteract that? Right? And I think the way to go about it, and we're going to talk about in the offseason moves, is to, get a good rushing attack. Defense has got to play better. Because I'm going to tell you this, Lamar Jackson in the first half didn't play good football against the Houston Texans. But guess what? His defense kept him in the game. It was 10-10 at the end of the first half? It was 27-7 at the end of the first half for the Green Bay Packers. Now, I get it. Dak did throw a pick six. Okay? And I'm not going to put that on the defense because that's not right. I'm not putting that pick six on the defense. It didn't count for them. But they still gave up 21 points going into halftime. And that's fair. The interception in the on their side of the field, it didn't help. Again, that's a great play by Jair Alexander. But guess what? If you're an elite defense, you hold them to 3 points. Okay, that's what happens in that situation. But again, when we look at Dak Prescott as a quarterback, where are you going to find somebody better than him? Where? Who? What's the answer? Because everybody talks about move on from Dak Prescott. Okay, and who are you going to replace him with? You think that you have the right to say move on from him, but then when I ask, okay, well, who are they going to move on from? The common answer is, well, I don't know. I'm not a GM. Well, yeah, I know you're not a GM. I get that. But if you're going to sit there and say, get rid of the quarterback, who are they replacing him with? Because Trey Lance ain't gonna be any better for this organization. Trey Lance isn't the answer. This is a guy who has gotten injured, missed a lot of time, going back to his college days. Doesn't have a lot of reps in the NFL. This is a flat-out project quarterback. And by the way, Trey Lance's contract ends when Dak Prescott's contract ends. Which, by the way, that was such a bad trade, man. And I said it at the time, too. Go back and look at what I said on TikTok. Hated that trade. Absolutely hated it. And now the Cowboys don't have a 4th-round pick for it. Which sucks. It sucks so much because I like a lot of these prospects in that 4th-round area. And the Cowboys draft very well in the 4th round. The fact that you don't have, a 4th-round pick after trading for Trey Lance is a bit ridiculous. It's annoying. But yeah, Dak should be questioned after this performance. Absolutely. No doubt about it. He was really bad. But my thing is, when it comes to this, it's not Dak getting a majority of the blame. He does not deserve a majority of the blame. He doesn't. Okay. It needs to be evenly distributed. What about Micah Parsons? He was a no-show. Micah Parsons has been a no-show over the past 2 seasons in the second half of the year. I think he's gotten 2.5 sacks over the last 7 games. And I get it, sacks aren't everything. But you can get, 11.5 in the first, 11 games or 10 games that you play? But you can only get 2.5 in the next 7? Come on, guys. The writing's on the wall. And that's one thing I'm not going to do with this football team anymore. When the writing is on the wall, I'm going to read the writing. Because they told us all year, big game. Bills, 49ers, we're not even on the same playing field as these teams. Okay, when the writing is on the wall next season, I'm going to read it. And if the writing on the wall says this could potentially be a Super Bowl team, then I'll read the writing and I'll say, hey, this could potentially be a Super Bowl team. But they're going to have to show me. They're going to have to go into big spots when they're not favored, when they're on the road, when they're in a tough spot, and go win a game. For example, right? And I know their season flat out collapsed, and they're not a very good football team right now. But when the Eagles went into Kansas City and won that football game on the road, that was an incredibly impressive win because they were in a tough spot on the road versus a very good football team, and they found a way to win that game. I mean, also Marquez Valdez-Scantling dropped an easy touchdown, but you get what I'm saying. One of those type of wins. Go into a good team's home, not be the favorite, and go pull out a win. Because guess what? Other coaches are doing that. LaFleur did that. LaFleur did that twice this postseason outside of winning versus San Fran. They were heavy underdogs in that game. But guess what? They went out there and they played really good football because that's a really well-coached football team. You know, he gets the most out of his guys. McCarthy doesn't. But I went off on a little bit of a tangent here. Dak's extension, it's in the works. And the sooner you accept it, the less mad you'll be when the contract extension gets signed. All right, let's talk about the offseason for the Cowboys. Look, they're going to have to go all in, flat out. What they did last offseason isn't going to be enough. Now, if they want to make those type of deals, because those were nice players that they added. But at the end of the day, they were just small improvements to your roster, right? Like, for example, Dalton Schultz was a nice player for your football team, and you replaced a nice player with a nice player in Brandon Cooks. You know, Diggs unfortunately got injured, and you replaced him with Stephon Gilmore and Deron Bland on the opposite side of him. You know, your cornerback room was better this year than it was last year because it was just not good last year. It wasn't a flat-out liability this year. It wasn't. I thought they were fine. I thought that the corners were fine. You know, they did well with the hand that they were dealt. But these were nice additions that they had for their football team last year. But in terms of all in, no, it did not fit that billing. You know, to me, all in would be, hey, go pick up, you know, one of these big name running backs that could potentially be on the market, along with a Patrick Queen. Maybe a Chris Jones is out there. Maybe you talk about him. You know, obviously you're not going to get all three of those guys, but if you can get me Patrick Queen and Chris Jones, and they're going to be able to create some cap space. They will. They're going to be able to do that. If you can go get those guys, then yeah, like I think that fans will be on board for this team this upcoming season. But to me, this isn't about personnel. This is about who's in charge of that personnel. It's the coaching staff, Mike McCarthy and Dan Quinn. If they're back next year, how can I have any faith in this football team? They've had great rosters in the past. They had a great roster in 2021. It was an undisciplined football team, and that's ultimately why they ended up losing in the first round. Now, granted, I do give them a little bit of a pass for the 2022 season. The front office made some big changes to that roster, and they were kind of in a bad spot. They dealt with some bad injuries going into that San Fran game, so I'll give them a little bit of a pass on that one. This year, no excuse whatsoever. You were home, you played the youngest team in NFL history, and you lost. And you lost in embarrassing fashion. So they're going to have to go all in. You know, they're going to have to create a better run scheme. You can bring in Derrick Henry. You can bring in Saquon. You can bring in Josh Jacobs. You can bring in whoever. Doesn't matter. Doesn't mean anything if you're not improving how you run the football instead of who you're running the football with. Because that's ultimately, at the end of the day, what is the most important? It's about the X's and O's and the Jimmies and Joes. If you have both of those things, you're going to be unstoppable. Right? Look at San Francisco. They have the X's and O's and the Jimmies and Joes. And they're a really good football team. And if this team could have the X's and O's to go along with the Jimmies and Joes, because they have that, then they'd be a much better football team. You know, 13 personnel, halfback dive. How creative is that? How creative is that? Go look at some of these efficient run schemes, right? Like Detroit or Miami, right? Like, you wouldn't think of Miami as a team that's great at running the football. And I think that they're very good at running the football. It's at least enough to keep a defense honest. And that's why you ultimately have to look at what Dak Prescott did this season and walk away a bit impressed, because he did all this with the offense being him and CeeDee Lamb. Now, if you start adding more wrinkles to this offense, you get a better run scheme. You can run the ball more efficiently. That takes pressure off Dak Prescott. You want pressure being taken off Dak Prescott, right? Buffalo did that with Josh Allen. They have a good run scheme over there, and I know they fell short against Kansas City, but, they took pressure off Josh Allen. Hey, don't worry about it. We got James Cook. We'll get him the football. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about pressing. Josh Allen does the same stuff that Dak does when he gets behind. Dak tries to make the 14-point play, just like Josh Allen does, and unfortunately comes back to bite him. So to me, better run scheme is very important. They're going to need to go get a linebacker in free agency. That would be much appreciated. Patrick Quinn is a guy that we're talking about. That's a guy that I think the Cowboys can go out there and realistically get. I mean, think about it like this. If they actually played Micah Parsons more off ball, his brother talked about it on Twitter. And I get it. Like, his brother is making a little bit of a name for himself by saying some stuff on Twitter. But one thing I agree with him big time on is first, second down, play Micah Parsons off ball. Third down, let him rush the passer. If you have Micah Parsons as the Mike linebacker and Patrick Quinn as your weak side linebacker, teams are going to have difficulty running the football on you. And you have Jonathan Hankins, who's a pretty solid nose tackle. And you have an Osa, who's a good 3-technique run stopper. Just an overall defensive lineman. Good pass rusher, good run stopper. Teams are going to have a hard time running the football on you. You have DeMarcus Lawrence. You have a guy like Sam Williams, who I think has a lot of potential to be a good player against the run. Right? You have these guys on your roster. So grabbing a linebacker is going to be important for them. Maybe even two. Because I just don't think Damone Clark is it. And you don't know with DeMarvion Overshown. You just don't know about him because he is coming off that bad injury, ACL injury. We've seen how ACL injuries affect these players that the Cowboys have. And they're going to have to nail this draft. They are. Look, last year's draft was bad. Mozzie in the first, Luke Schoonmaker in the second. 2 picks that I liked. I'll own that. I like those 2 picks. I misevaluated those players. I liked Overshown. Overshown was on his way to being a really good football player. Now, Vladimir Fioco showed some things last year in the preseason. He did. 5th round pick, Awesome Richards. I think with Awesome Richards, he didn't get the opportunity because the offensive line was so deep. So that's the reason why he didn't get an opportunity there. Deuce Vaughn, wasn't his year. Jalen Brooks, I like Jalen Brooks a lot. I do. I like him a lot. And I think that he could potentially be a player for this football team. What type of player? Maybe somewhere close to a Michael Gallup. But I think that he has potential. But they're going to have to nail this draft. They're going to have to get back to what they did in 2022. To where I think a big reason as to why they were so good in 2022 was the fact that they were getting so much production from their rookies. So, that's what they're going to have to do this offseason if they want to improve this team and get fans back on board. All right, so this is some of my favorite stuff to talk about. The NFL draft, it's my favorite part of the offseason. I have my 3-round mock draft for the Cowboys 1.0. So here's some questions that the Cowboys have to ask themselves going into this draft. The 2 deepest positions are wide receiver and offensive tackle. How do they feel about their offensive line going forward? Because here's the thing. I do think that they keep Tyron Smith. And if they are really going all in this year and they're just completely throwing caution to the wind when it comes to future years, then you might want to go wide receiver here due to the fact that, when I look at these number 2 wide receivers that get added to these football teams, I look at it Devontae Smith. Now, he wasn't added after A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown came to that team. But you see the dynamic between A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and how well they play together. You see Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. You see, Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. Even what Kirk Cousins was doing with the Vikings when they got Jordan Addison. They drafted him in the first round. They had Jefferson and Addison. That was a very explosive offense. So I don't think it's a bad idea to add, a really good number 2 wide receiver to your roster. And there's going to be plenty of guys there at that pick that the Cowboys could potentially pick up. Some of those wide receivers are going to be Xavier Legette from South Carolina. You have Troy Franklin from Oregon, maybe Keon Coleman from Florida State slides down the board, and you could potentially pick him up. You just never know who's going to be available there, right? So you have to ask yourself, okay, do we want to draft the positions that are the deepest in this first round, or do we want to go maybe a Kool-Aid McKinstry? The players available in my mock draft, I had Kool-Aid McKinstry, cornerback from Alabama. He's a good player. So you have to ask yourself this, okay, is it a bad idea to add Kool-Aid McKinstry to the secondary, and your boundary corners for the next few years here are Diggs, McKinstry, and then you have Deron Bland playing in the slot? Is that a bad idea? I don't think it's a bad idea. It's not the way I would go, just because I don't think the Cowboys need a corner. Jordan Morgan from Arizona. I haven't watched his tape yet. I don't have access to the 2023 offensive line tape from Arizona yet. We'll have to see if I end up getting that. But I hear really good things about this guy. I do. So if he's there, I think the Cowboys are going to give him some serious consideration. I'm hearing that he's probably going to be a riser. Braylon Trice from Washington and Graham Barton. So I haven't watched Trice's film yet. I'm still pretty early in the process here. I did watch Graham Barton. I'm a big fan of his. If the Cowboys end up going that direction, I'm completely fine with that. I think this guy's nasty. He has position flex. They might play him at center if, they lose a Tyler Biotic, let's just say, if they end up drafting him, and then maybe he's Zach Martin's replacement, something like that, or maybe they just keep him at center for the rest of his career. This team had Travis Frederick. They drafted him in the first round. Was that a bad first round pick? The Baltimore Ravens drafted Tyler Linderbaum in the first round a few years ago. Was that a bad first round pick? So, if he ends up just being a really high level center, if Graham Barton becomes Jason Kelce, are you going to be upset with that pick? I'm not. I didn't end up picking him here, even though he was available. Who I ended up picking, though, was Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver from Louisiana State University. I got a scouting report here. By the way, I'm going to have a draft show where I just go over prospects and storylines when it comes to the draft. That's dropping pretty soon. But let's talk about Brian Thomas Jr. going to the Cowboys here at pick 24. This is my scouting report on him. He's 6'4", 205 pounds, right? So nice frame for an NFL receiver. And I think he can grow into a more physically imposing frame. His pro comp from a lot of people is Martavius Bryant. You know who plays for the Dallas Cowboys right now? Martavius Bryant. So it's clear that they like that prototype in a player. But I'll go over my scouting report here. So his stats from the 2021 season: 28 receptions, 41 targets, 359 yards, 2 touchdowns, 12.6 yards per reception, 5 drops, and 0 from fumbles. 2022, 31 receptions, 48 targets, 361 yards, 5 touchdowns, 11.6 yards per reception, 3 drops, and 0 fumbles. 2023, 68 receptions, 87 targets, 1,177 yards, 17 touchdowns, 17.3 yards per reception, 5 drops, and a fumble. Okay, so just right off the bat, what are these stats telling you? Now, when it comes to evaluating a prospect, stats are not the end-all, be-all, but it's something that you have to look into, right? Because it could mean one of two things. One, is he a one-year wonder? Two, is he just a late bloomer and his latest season in college football is when he really takes off? I'm going towards the latter, into him being a late bloomer, because this guy has it. Let's go over, what Brian Thomas Jr. going into Louisiana. He attended Walker High School in Louisiana, where he was a two-sport star, playing both football and basketball, where he got Power Conference scholarships in both sports, consensus 4-star recruit from Rivals, ESPN, 24/7 Sports, and On3. As a basketball player, he had offers from Florida and Texas A&M, and helped Walker High School win the 5A Louisiana State title in 2018 as a freshman, named second team All-State as a junior, and scored more than 1,000 points in all 3 of his basketball seasons. That's incredible. So what does that tell me, right? You're a 2-sport star. You get Division I offers from, schools in basketball and football. That tells me that you are a dedicated athlete. It is very hard to be as good as Brian Thomas Jr. is at both football and basketball. Very hard. First round pick receiver potentially, and a guy who could have went D1 for basketball. So if I'm a general manager, that's a green flag, big time green flag. So, right now, when I'm looking at just his resume as a whole, I'm seeing his best season was his junior season. I think that that's, reflective on his tape. I think that he's a late bloomer compared to just a one-year wonder. And I see that he's a two sports star and getting Division I offers in both sports, and he's going to be a first-round pick receiver. He's a dedicated athlete. I'm not questioning his work ethic whatsoever. That's one thing that I'm thinking as a general manager of an NFL football team. He led the country in touchdowns, guys. That's incredible. Had more than Marvin Harrison Jr., had more than Malik Neighbors, had more than Roma Dunze. He had more than all those guys. He's a red zone threat, very good frame for an NFL receiver, consistently gets leverage with his release and his route running. It feels like this guy always has a way to get open. It's a big-time vertical threat, big time. Explosive player, does a really good job tracking the ball, ideal length, two-sport star in high school, which leans to him having an incredible work ethic, and he has a very high ceiling. The cons is that he has 1 year of major success. Now, I look at that as him being a late bloomer compared to being a one-hit wonder. Played alongside an elite player, so the defenses weren't primarily focused on him. That is a thing. The physicality of the NFL will be an adjustment for him. We'll see how he makes that adjustment, and he does need to develop his route tree a little bit. Other than that, I'll probably end up with a second-round grade on Brian Thomas Jr. To give you guys a little bit of a background on how grading works when it comes to prospects is that, NFL teams have about 12 on the low end to 20 on the high end first round grades. He would probably, to me, and that's the way I, go about grading these players. I'd say that Brian Thomas Jr. is at the very top of the second round grades. But when you get to pick 24, there's a very real possibility that you're wiped out of first round grades in general. So, I just wanted to put that out there for you guys so that I could give you guys a little bit of a breakdown on how, I went over Brian Thomas Jr. here. Okay, so second round pick, pick 56. You got players available were Edgerrin Cooper, Texas A&M linebacker, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., linebacker from Clemson. Running back Jonathan Brooks from Texas. Very good prospect. Tore his ACL. That's going to be something to look at. Zach Frazier, center from West Virginia. Because you have to ask yourself, going into this draft, is Tyler Biotic our center? And if he's not our center, who's going to be our center next season? I assume that they would slot Brock Hoffman in that spot for the time being. But he would ultimately get beat out by this gentleman, and that's Jackson Powers Johnson, center out of Oregon. 6'3", 320 pounds. 2021, he didn't allow a single sack, 0 quarterback hits, 1 hurry, 1 pressure, 1 penalty, 26 left guard snaps, 20 center snaps, and 80 right guard snaps. 2022, 0 sacks allowed, 1 quarterback hit, 1 hurry, 2 pressures, 4 penalties, 1 left guard snap, 44 center snaps, 350 right guard snaps, 5 right tackle snaps. 2023, 0 sacks allowed, 0 quarterback hits, 1 hurry, 1 pressure, 9 penalties, 829 center snaps. So, his latest season played a majority of that at center, which means I think that he's most likely going to transition to just being strictly a center on the next level. Attended Corner Canyon in Draper, Utah, where he was a consensus 4-star recruit from ESPN Rivals, 24/7 Sports, and On3. In high school, he helped Corner Canyon win 3 state championships playing on both sides of the ball. They won back-to-back 6A state championships and a 5A state championship as they went 51-1 when he was there. He also played baseball and wrestled in high school. So Will McClay, the VP of player personnel, is big on, guys playing multiple sports, right? So He looks at that. Pros are that he has very good size for an NFL center. I don't know if he's going to go across the line, but we'll talk about that. Excellent in pass protection, only giving up one pressure all season. Does a good job picking up stunts and helping in pass protection, can anchor well, moves well for his size, does a good job in run blocking, reaches the second level, can be used as a pull blocker. Cons is that he can be tall in his stance and allow opponents to get hands on his chest from times. Probably doesn't have a lot of position flex in the NFL. If you're drafting this guy, you're drafting a center. And he can struggle with balance at times, but can work on that in the NFL with the right coaching. So, I don't hate linebacker in this spot. I really don't. But I do like that pick of Jackson Powers Johnson. And again, we're going to be going over different names, right? I don't want these mock drafts to look the same every single week. I want you guys to get familiar with these names. And I want you guys to tune into the draft show so that you can get more familiar with these names. But, I just want to put some names out there, get you guys familiar with these guys. Okay, so with my third round pick, the players left on the board, notable names, Blake Corum and Braden Fisk from FSU. But ultimately, I ended up picking Trey Benson here. Pick 87 in the third round, 87 overall, third round, Trey Benson. Now, they definitely can go linebacker here, but the linebackers that were on the board, I just wasn't really that big of a fan of, which is ultimately why the Cowboys might need to reach a little bit in the second round and maybe go grab a linebacker, depending on how their team ends up being put together going into this draft. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, it does suck that a linebacker wasn't available in this spot because I probably would have taken it. But we took Trey Benson, who I think is a very good prospect here at the running back position. Height, 6'1", weight, 223 pounds. Stats, 2021, 6 carries, 22 yards, 3.7 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown, and 0 fumbles. 2022, 154 carries, 990 yards, 6.4 yards per attempt, 9 touchdowns, and 0 fumbles. 2023, 156 carries, 905 yards, 5.8 yards per attempt, 14 touchdowns, and 0 fumbles. So automatically, what do you hear from those stats? He doesn't fumble the football. So you don't have to worry about that with Trey Benson. Spent his 2020 and 2021 season at Oregon before he transferred to Florida State. He tore his ACL, MCL, lateral meniscus, medial meniscus, and tendon in his hamstring at once. A tendon in his hamstring at once. In December of 2020 at practice. Went to St. Joseph's in Greenville, Missouri, where he was rated as a 4-star recruit from 24/7 Sports and a 3-star by Rivals and ESPN. Rushed for 3,616 yards and 48 touchdowns in 2 high school seasons as he helped St. Joseph's win back-to-back 3A MAIS state championships. Okay, so when you go over the pros of Trey Benson, if my paper will flip here. Good frame for an NFL running back, right? 6'1", 223 pounds. You're going to survive in the NFL with that frame. Violent runner, good lower body strength as he uses it to power through to get extra yards after contact. Only has 316 carries in his entire college career. You see Zeke's rushing attempts coming out of Ohio State and compare that to Trey Benson's, you'd be like, damn, that's a massive difference. Patient and good at waiting for blocks to develop. Good burst, good vision, can be an effective pass catcher out of the backfield and has potential to be a good receiver in the slot. The cons is that he suffered a really bad knee injury in 2020, but it has been, come the time the draft starts, he'd be, 3.5 years removed from his injury, and he's still showing explosiveness. He's still showing burst. He's still showing all that stuff. So, I get that people might be turned away by that injury that he had, and I don't blame you for doing that. But, I do see what I see on film is a really good player right now. Ineffective pass protector. Don't ask him to do that. It's going to be something that he's going to have to improve on throughout his career. Very much like Tony Pollard. And at times he plays with high pad level. So overall, as a prospect, Trey Benson, I'm probably going to have a 3rd round grade on him. Nice player, really nice player. And if the Cowboys want to get better at running the football and just offensively, I did go heavy on the offense here. But again, that's just my first mock draft. And the reason why I'm doing these mock drafts is that, I'll do a mock draft when it comes to closer to draft time to where I'll be like, no, this is where they should go. This is definitely who they should pick here. And this is the way they should go about it. And guys rise up and down boards during draft season like crazy. So some of these guys that I'm talking about, like let's just say, for example, Brian Thomas Jr., teams might look at him as a top 15 pick when this is all said and done, or they might look at him as a 2nd round pick, depending on, combine results, pro day results, how he interviews and all that other stuff. Right. So just getting you guys familiar with some names here. Don't hold me to the fire and say these are the guys that you want to pick when it's all said and done. I mean, granted, if they do end up with these 3 players, I know I drafted all offense here, but I think that you improve your offense big time if you do that, right? You add a number 2 receiver to your offense. You add a center that I think will be an upgrade from Tyler Biotic that I think will help you improve in your run game. You add a running back that you can now have for the next 4 seasons, and I think that your running game is going to improve because I think that he's probably going to be a better player than Tony Pollard next year due to the fact that, we're starting to see age catch up with Tony Pollard. So, yeah, fun stuff when it comes to the draft. And, I can't wait to go through this draft season with you guys. Make sure to look out for the draft show on Cowboys Beat here. I can't wait. I really can't wait. Got a lot of prospects lined up that I'm going to be watching and that I've already watched that I'm going to be talking to you guys about. So, yeah, be on the lookout for that. So that's going to be it for the Cowboys Beat podcast for January 22nd, 2024. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you guys made it this far into the episode, you guys are the best. There was a lot of news to talk about. I mean, man, you had the Mike McCarthy, Dan Quinn, Dak Prescott news. We had to talk about the game and how much of a colossal failure that was in the offseason and the mock drafts and stuff like that. So it's going to be a lot of fun this offseason. I'm going to be more consistent with these podcasts. I am 100%. It's hard to do it during the season because they do come out on Sunday and I got so much stuff to do following the game. But yeah, we're going to be more consistent with these podcasts this offseason. Expect the Cowboys Beat draft show to be in your library come Wednesday and Friday as well. Love talking about the draft. Love talking about prospects. So I will see you guys in the next episode.